Part of being successful is about asking questions and listening to the answers. Anne Burrell.
You're listening to Writing Roots, brought to you by Aspen House Publishing.
Welcome to Writing Roots. I'm Lee Hull.
And I'm Lee Esses. It is December, and every December we sit down and go through all of our favorite questions that have been asked throughout the year. It is an annual tradition at this point where the month is filled with questions that we have received or questions that we've answered in some way across all of our platforms. And we wanted to start off the month by talking about the questions themselves before we go into specifics about the answers.
What we want you to know is to never be afraid to ask a question. Never be afraid to consider and reach out if you don't know something. Because the worst mistakes that we can make is to assume that we know everything, to be too afraid to ask.
Whether or not you're asking a question or just thinking about it, do not let the lack of answer stop you from writing. Worst comes to worst, you go back and you edit it. I see a lot of people going, well, I don't have every single question answered, so I'm not going to even start my first draft. I call this mentality a getting ready to get ready. They're not going to be there quite yet because they have all these other things that they want to do first. So don't let the questions stop you. We are here to encourage you, to help you learn from our mistakes, and to help all of us grow together. And you help me when you ask a question.
With that being said, we are going to get into, throughout the month, the questions that we've received throughout the year. Some of them we have answered. Like in our Discord channel, we do the best to answer them right away. Other questions that we've seen in forums on social media that are fairly popular among writers, we want to make sure that we're sharing these answers as widely as we can. Because we know if one person is asking it, there are many people who are asking the same thing, but they don't know where to go to get the answer.
I think even one of our questions this month came from our Spotify. Someone left a comment going, what about this? And so thank you to listeners wherever you are for asking the questions because you're helping all of our listeners grow.
If you only take one thing from this entire month, let it be that writing is an art, but it's also a craft. There are processes that can be learned.
I see people on social media saying that since writing is an art, it is an expression of self, and therefore you cannot learn your art from somebody else. Obviously, we don't agree with that because we wouldn't have 550 episodes of this podcast if we believed that we couldn't teach or learn anything. So that half and half mentality, I believe, is the best recipe you can have. Half of yourself, asking questions of yourself and questions only you can answer, and then half what you can learn from others.
Because going too far on either side means you'll never get writing done. If you fully believe that writing is just an expression of self and you don't need to learn anything about the craft, you're never going to write well enough to go anywhere with it. But if you spend so much time trying to learn every single aspect of the craft, you're never going to tap in that expression of self because you're too worried about if it's technically correct, if this is something that people will accept. So you have to find a balance between the two if you want to write well those stories that you have within yourself.
So let's get into the types of questions you ask of yourself. These are questions that I cannot answer for you, but these are still questions you should be asking yourself in order to improve your writing style, find your own voice, and continue to grow as an author.
I know one thing that you, Lee, like to ask yourself all the time is, what will challenge me? You always try to include something in your story that you've never done before. And I love that aspect of your writing because it shows everyone that you are constantly trying to improve, that you're stretching your own boundaries, that you're never going to fall into a rut of writing this same thing over and over again, just with slightly different locations.
And I will say that not every experiment is a success. Please do not assume that. I tried writing spicy scenes for the first time this year. Did not work. Do not recommend. Not gonna happen again. But I know that now about myself. So I know when I challenge myself in other ways that this is how I respond and how my writing style is. And it's possible in the future I'll try again because I'll grow and I'll be a different person at that point. Another question to ask yourself is, what do I like?
I like to read fantasy. I like to read some murder mysteries. I then will go and write the things I like to read. It just makes more sense.
So if you really like the found family trope, please write the found family trope because this is something you enjoy. And it's most important that you enjoy your writing first.
This is something you can really jump in. If you really like a trope, but you struggle finding things that do it well, then write it well. For me, it's the enemies to lovers. I love that trope. It is so rarely done well that one of the stories that I set out to write was an enemies to lovers, and I made sure to include the correct progression in my mind of how those stories should go.
Another question to ask yourself is a little more cerebral, a little more philosophical. Something along the lines of, what is the nature of forgiveness? These types of questions can be the seed that starts a really powerful and potent story. And these aren't questions that you would automatically know the answer to, but through writing your story, you discover the answer.
Because writing is about exploration, just as much as it is about entertaining people. You have to have that kind of combination of both. And not every story needs to be some great philosophical work. Sometimes you just need a hobbit going on an adventure.
I would say those ones are arguably more powerful because they're simple.
And that's the thing, is there's so much that can be learned even with the simple stories. The things that on the surface are just an entertaining idea, but if you dig into it, there is that exploration of ideas.
Now, what about the asking questions of others? I can learn from other people, but how? What types of questions should I be asking myself versus asking Lee or someone else to help guide me through?
One of the first things that you'll need to look at is experience. And if you need to outsource, that's perfectly fine. There are people in the industry who are there to help provide guidance and answer questions and provide information to people who are just starting out in their journey of writing. And that's when you go to those people to learn about their experience, you can present them with, here's where I'm at. How did you tackle a problem that you had that was similar?
And I want to remind you that their brain does not work the same as yours. There are many ways to get to Rome. Their way is not the only way. It is a way to get there. So if I tell you, hey, this is my editing process or whatever, then you don't have to hold this as the gold standard. But if you don't have any editing process or the one you've been using isn't working for you, try it this way and then modify it. You don't have to have every answer right now. That is part of the journey of being an author.
So some of the things that you can outsource for your questions are getting answers about how fight scenes should work, about how your editing process can work, about disabilities or other forms of representation. You also can go to people with experience if you're looking into something like traditional publishing and you need help with how to query, how to format your manuscript, all that kind of stuff. There is information out there that will help you fill the industry standards.
Something I think a lot of people don't really realize when asking questions is it's okay to expect wrong answers. I feel like Lee and I have this down pretty well because we'll be in a situation where we have to talk through it. So we will brainstorm and start giving the other person really bad ideas, as well as ones that we think might actually solve the problem, because just arguing with a bad idea will help the brain go. And this is how brainstorming works, at least with us.
Brainstorming is a great resource when you are stuck, when you can't figure out where to move forward. It's about stirring the pot of creativity more than about getting to the right or wrong answer.
Something else to keep in mind when asking questions of other people, what are they reading? what do they write? If you're asking me, I will tell you your story needs less romance. I can just say that right off the bat because this is what I prefer in a story. But obviously, if you're asking Lee, she's going to say, make them kiss and love and blah, 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 all the gooey stuff.
Only if you set it up first, like you did.
I'll never live that down.
Nope. But it's that understanding of certain advice is going to be better from certain people if they read particular genres, if they understand. I honestly will not take a lot of Lee's advice when it comes to writing my romantic stories, but I will take her advice about anything when it comes to fight scenes and killing people and torture.
So we want to encourage you to experiment, not only with your own writing and asking yourself questions, but when someone else gives you their way of doing it, try it out. See if you like it. Understands that this is the path that they found that works for them, not necessarily one that you need to do your own way. And I think there's a certain level of maturity that comes with that because it's not just opposing the other person and making it, oh, this is mine and just my own and blah, 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 blah. You're the one writing it. You don't have to worry about whose method it was initially unless you're talking with other writers about the methods that worked and didn't for you.
But as you have that chance to experiment, to try out other people's styles, to try out their suggestions, you will find what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and you will become a better writer for it. But only if you
write selfishly.
If you have a question or comment for our hosts or a topic you'd like us to cover, send us an email at writingroots@aspenhousepublishing.com or find us on Facebook by searching for Aspen House Publishing.